Good evening and welcome to Q&A. I'm Tony Jones, and answering your questions tonight, the Institute of Public Affairs' James Patterson, former Labor Senate leader Chris Evans, author and social innovator Rachel Botsman, comedian and writer Corinne Grant, and Shadow Attorney General George Brandis. Please welcome our panel. Thank you. Q&A is live from 9:35 Eastern Daylight Saving Time. It is simulcast on News 24 and News Radio. You can go to our website to send a question now or join the Twitter conversation using the hashtag on your screen. Well, our first question tonight comes from Helen Lappin.
I'm a long-time AFL fan and I love going to live games. But in the past year, I've been unable to enter the grounds without someone trying to give me a flyer from Tom Waterhouse encouraging me to take a bet on the game. I find it most annoying and disappointing that children going to the games are in an environment where sport and betting go so publicly hand in hand. How has it come to this and how can we stop it?
Corinne, let's start with you.
I knew you would do that. I knew you would throw the sport question to me.
I thought you'd be fun.
Yeah, right. I love watching sport, but I've got to admit, when the ads for gambling or the ads for anything come on, I tune out. So I haven't paid a lot of attention to them. But I think there is something to be said for just enjoying the sport for the pure theatre of the game. And once you start throwing betting into that and betting on who has the first pass, who kicks the first goal, all of those kind of things.
Who's got the best performance-enhancing drugs?
Well, that's right. The comedians.
Yeah.
That's who've got the best performance-enhancing drugs. But as soon as you throw that into the game, it takes you out of the theatre of it. And that is one issue. Of course, there's all the moral issues around gambling as well, and the destructive element that causes for families and for people who are prone to addiction when it comes to gambling as well. I think that we could definitely have a lot less of it.
James Patterson. The question really was, should we stop it, or how can we stop it, in fact?
Well, I don't think we should stop it, and we certainly can't stop it. The reality is that people want to have a bet. People want to have a punt on the footy, on the horses, or whatever they're passionate about, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if I did have something wrong with that, I wouldn't seek to impose my own values on them. If I didn't like gambling, I would choose not to engage in it myself, but I'd allow other people who have a different view to engage in it. The reality is that even if you did outlaw it or heavily regulate it, it would just drive it underground. It wouldn't end betting on sport. It's a natural thing that people want to do and have been doing for thousands of years.
Does it open the doors to problems? We've just talked about the performance-enhancing drugs. We've been talking about that now for quite some time. And the other half of that is whether gambling encourages things like match fixing.
There's already massive incentives involved in sport, elite sport. There's huge contracts for sponsorship and all these sorts of things. That incentive is already inbuilt to cheat for people who want to do that and people who are willing to do that. I don't think gambling changes that already. I think it would occur naturally, and sports need to have robust processes to make sure that doesn't happen.
Rachel Botsman, what do you think?
Well, I think on the gambling issue, it's interesting that if you think of other forms of addiction in society, smoking, alcohol, they have to carry warning signs. So why isn't gambling, doesn't it have the same regulations? So on packets of cigarettes now, we have those awful pictures that turn people off. For every advert of
They do have pictures of Tom Waterhouse, doesn't that turn you off?
It does actually turn me off, but for every advert for him, there should be a counter-advert, is my personal opinion. But, you know, it's been really interesting watching the news over the last couple of days, and the thing that's really bothered me is that no one has really spoken about the impact the uber commercialisation of sport is having on sport itself. And I think that's the issue. It doesn't matter if it's betting or drugs enhancement. We treat sportsmen like commodities now. You know, are they a good asset or a bad asset? And I would just love one of these, you know, Andrew Dimitru, to stand up there and actually take responsibility. For him to stand up and say, I don't know what's going on, is actually a sign of weakness. If these players are their most valuable assets, they should know everything that's going on about them. That's their responsibility.
Chris Evans.
Oh, look, I think I don't necessarily agree with James. I know the point he's trying to make, but I think the reality is we've seen a huge growth in the pushing of betting at people watching sport in the last few years. I think it's insidious. I know my sons, when we're watching the footy now, describe the Dockers' chances at about $7 rather than normally saying, we've got no chance. I can assure you the Dockers aren't on drugs, or they're certainly not performance enhancing. But we're loyal. But it just comes at you. There's that young woman with an annoying voice on every sort of 3 or 4 minutes, encouraging her to bet. And I think we can do something about that. I think we can actually try and find a way that says we should not be trying to allow it to take over in the way that it has.
Well, the accusation that'll be levelled against the government if you try and do that you're creating a bigger and bigger nanny state with each regulation. But can you actually imagine a government going ahead and somehow regulating sports betting in the same way that it's regulated cigarette smoking and cigarette advertising and alcohol advertising?
Well, look, it is difficult, but there are more than one way to skin a cat, and I think you can, in a range of sports, we've got codes of practice, we've got agreements about how we handle some of these issues. I just don't see that it's necessary for us to have the bombardment that we're getting in sport, be it on television or walking through the gate. I think we can get better practices, and we're seeing now that this is also, it appears, driving corruption and organised crime links. So this is a serious issue in addition to the broader gambling social issues. I'm not a wowser about gambling, but it has gone far too far in my view.
George Brandis.
I'm largely where James is. I think that sport and betting have always been together for as long as Australian culture has been Australian culture. It's an integral to Australian sporting culture, and I don't think that's a bad thing of itself.
I don't think it has changed a lot. I mean, this rapid expansion of betting, television betting,
well,
on
I was
sport
going to go on to that, Tony. And I think we should start from the presumption that if people want to bet, then that's a matter for them, and it's not a matter for regulators to tell them that they shouldn't. Now, that having been said, I agree with you that I think there has been something of a change, particularly in broadcast elite sport, in which the advertisements for betting and the display of odds on the screen is very constant and very invasive. Now, I think there is, perhaps I part company from James at this point, I think there is a case for regulating broadcast advertising, as we do, in circumstances in which the particular form of advertising is so invasive that it risks ruining the viewer's experience of the game. But beyond that, I wouldn't go.
But government